Thomas, how are you?
Good, man.
You know,
Good.
I was talking to Alex, and he was talked about his approach to storytelling, and he loves to see cinema as a medium for empathy. I was wondering if you saw a little bit. There's a lot of layers to this story. Did you see this as a medium for empathy? This story from your POV?
I mean, absolutely. You know, from the very first time I read it, there was just so much heart and but also tragedy and a treacherous journey for a woman in her 30s confronting after this 12 years of estrangement, not knowing at all who she was going to be confronting that used to be her father. And so there was a humanity to it, and yes, and I think a very an empathy to it. But there was, as you already said, there was just so much more. And I talked about this a lot in interviews, that Diana's own personal story and Alex's own personal story and my personal story with my father, we had so much time, literally 9 months of like all talking, and the discourse of we'd be talking about the script and Maggie and Lloyd, but we would just easily morph into Alex and his father, Diana and her father, me and my dad. It would just go any direction, and sort of like ricochet. So to the point that it was, the lines they weren't blurred, but they were just sort of in a very esoteric way removed. That Diana, while Diana is a good bit, I mean, I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old daughter, but Diana, she's young enough to where she could have been my daughter, had I had a daughter in my early 20s, but which I was ridiculously too immature to ever have a child in my early 20s. It was an interesting dynamic, and an interesting exercise to go through, of how, if Maggie had been my daughter from those early 20s to the age that whenever she catches up with him, and I think I was 60 when we shot the movie, and she catches up to this 60-year-old man who's so emotionally remote and isolated and guarded and closed off. It's like she's just searching for who used to be, and now she's met with what is. And I don't even know how disconnected I am until she shows up. And it's the same thing for me. It's like I think I said it at some point in it, and it may have gotten cut out, but I said something like, I miss that little girl, or I miss that, I said something like that at some point when I was looking at a picture or something, or maybe it was the short story, the Slam Dunk Tuesday. I said something that maybe I didn't say it, but I felt it, of how much I missed her. I missed that daughter, and had never. I was having a lot of trouble. Lloyd was having a lot of trouble understanding now that she's this grown woman who's married, and certain other things about her personal life that we find out. So yes, embedded in all that, I just found tremendous, frailty of the human condition, but yes, I mean, ultimately by the end, I think the characters have tremendous love and empathy for one another, but there's great uncertainty.
I guess in a layman's perspective, you have maybe 15, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16 days to shoot in the area,
Right.
out in nature. And you're talking about sometimes the good thing is lines were blurred. There's personal and there's story. What's it like when you're on a schedule, but you also have a real personal connection with the people you're working with? You're talking about that 9 months of talking about your characters, talking about the story. What is it like? You have a schedule, but you know what it's like to have that connection, as opposed to, it's not just professional, it's also a personal relationship. When you're working
Right.
together. I guess. Yeah.
It was crazy because whenever whenever we actually all met, um, I got there a week early and Dianna got there a week early. So we could rehearse, but also go check out the locations and just get comfortable, with where we were going to be, and and then just hit the ground running. But Alex said it many times. It's like by the time we got there, he just wanted to, like, he goes, I just want to capture it. It's like, we're there. You guys are there. There's no way we can know the characters better than we knew them. She couldn't, and yet shooting, we still learned about one another. But it's when we got there, I'd never met Alex and I never met Dianna, but I felt like I'd already been friends with them for a year, for almost a year. And so it was a very unique dynamic. And so when we get there and it's like, let's go, it was just, man, keep the camera roll, keep the camera. There's two cameras rolling almost all the time. And it was just like, it's like he just wanted to capture as much of the characters' lives as he could in the time that we had. And what I was just telling the last journalist, that by the end of the schedule, I like felt like it's like we almost had too much time, and we were able to even condense a little. And then we were able to go over to the coast and shoot some stuff with the younger Lloyd and Maggie the child that we weren't even sure we were going to be able to do. Like Alex thought we might have to do that, at another time. And Dianna and I come and go like somewhere in the California coast and shoot like one day of second unit or something. And we ended up being able to do it when we were in Oregon, which is way better because the Oregon coast is so unique. I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I've never been to
So
Oregon.
unique.
Just a curious question. I still haven't seen Rolling Kansas. Definitely want to check it out. But you approach your art from a directing and writing standpoint as well. Do you think directing is going to be in your future? Do you still have a passion for going behind that camera? You're talking about camera rolling. Do you think you might want to direct down the road as well?
Yeah, I have a project in the fall that I wrote and I'm directing, and we're in the process of, we really do have the money, but it's just now it's like we're sort of on the slow. I have another thing that I'm probably shooting this spring, and then I have to do a role in this big Kevin Costner Western series called Horizon. I'm doing that this summer. So this other thing called West Texas Honey, it's getting pushed into the fall, but which is kind of when we wanted to do it. But I'm directing that, and I'm very excited about it. It's a story set in 1982 in West Texas.
Oh, that's amazing. A couple more questions, Thomas. I'm a huge Walter Hill fan, and
Oh, nice.
me and my mom were, obviously we're Asians. We really appreciate that you talked about humanity. We really appreciated the representation in Broken
Nice.
Trail, and just your thoughts on working. You got an Emmy wins for that. Just your recollections working with Walter Hill on such. You were talking about empathy, such a very humanistic project as well.
That was all that was really, Robert Duvall. It was adapted. I don't know if it was a book. I don't remember exactly, but it was originally called Daughters of Joy, and which unfortunately, for the Chinese culture, the young women that were sex trafficked to that very unfortunate period of our history in America. That really started with this writer Alan Jeffrey, who was close friends with Bobby. They're actually neighbors, and Alan, I think, trained horses for Bobby, but Alan was also a writer, and so he and Bobby, Alan wrote it, but with Bobby, they kind of they crafted it and then brought it to Walter, and then, you know, Walter got involved. But, you know, it was a great experience on so many levels, loving to do a Western with Robert Duvall and Walter Hill, who I'm also a massive, massive fan of, all the way back into the 70s, Long Riders, and, you know, even Hard Times, very first picture that he directed with Charles Bronson. I'm a big fan of that movie. I mean, I could do an interview with just about Walter, but the actresses, you know, I believe, I, I
They look
think,
so good.
I think only 3 were Chinese and 1 was Korean, I think. And I think the Korean actress, she was actually a news reporter from Edmonton, Alberta, but she was great. She was so comfortable in front of the camera. And then Gwendolyn Yeo, who's this terrific, accomplished Chinese actress. And then the other actresses, Gwendolyn was the only one that was cast out of LA. And, you know, she was in Desperate Housewives. She's done a lot of stuff. But then the other 3 actresses, I'm pretty sure, were cast out of Canada. But just talking to them and talking about their history and their culture and their legacy and their families, and it really it created, you talk about empathy, you know, there's like a whole world that I was kind of just unaware of how much sex trafficking went on in that period of our history, from China. I think from all of the sort of Pan Asian or, you know, Pan Pacific countries. I think Japan and China and what used to, I guess, was at one time a unified Korea, but I think they trafficked women, you know, from all of the Asian countries, you know, to the Pacific Northwest, and then of course anywhere that they're, you know, they were used as rail workers and mine workers, and, you know, there's so much tragedy that history is steeped in, and to be able to be a part of it, like that, just this one tiny kind of humanitarian story about saving these girls from a horrific existence and getting them to a place where they would be safe and they would be protected, and ultimately, you know, it would be their salvation. And a lot of it's based on true stories. It's a kind of an amalgam of true stories.
Thomas, thank you so much for your time. Really loved Acidman, and looking forward to interviewing you in a couple of years for your directing project.
Thank you. Thank
Cheers.
you
Thank
so
you.
much.